If you've been in crypto long enough, you know one thing. Opportunities don't last forever. Every few years, the market gives us a window. A moment in time where those who act with conviction create life-changing wealth, while everyone else hesitates and watches it pass by. Right now, in late 2025, we're standing at the edge of that moment again. And this time, the asset at the center of it isn't Bitcoin or Ethereum. It's XRP. Over the next 12 to 18 months, XRP could mint a new generation of millionaires. And those who understand what's happening beneath the surface already know the window is closing fast. This is Crypto Equation. And today we're going deep into the facts, the timing, and the truth behind why XRP's next explosive phase is already in motion, and what you need to understand before it's too late. Let's start with the obvious question. Why 2026? Why is that year so critical for XRP and for the broader crypto market? To answer that, we have to zoom out. Crypto markets move in cycles, historically 4-year patterns, driven by Bitcoin's halving events, liquidity cycles, and institutional capital flows. In 2024, Bitcoin had its latest halving, cutting the supply of new coins in half, setting off the foundation for the next bull cycle. The months following a halving are usually slow, uncertain, and filled with doubt. But as liquidity returns and macro conditions shift, the explosive growth phase begins, often around 12 to 18 months later. That's 2026. This is when altcoins historically outperform, and the ones with real-world use cases lead the way. That's where XRP comes in. Because unlike speculative tokens chasing trends, XRP has spent years building the one thing that truly matters in finance: infrastructure. Most investors don't realize how far Ripple has come since its SEC battle. That lawsuit, once seen as a death sentence, turned into a crucible that proved XRP's legitimacy. When the courts ruled that XRP itself was not a security when traded on secondary markets, it gave Ripple and its partners something priceless: regulatory clarity in the United States. That single ruling separated XRP from most of the crypto market. It meant banks, payment companies, and institutions could legally integrate Ripple's technology without fearing the SEC's hammer. Since then, Ripple has expanded globally, launching new corridors, deepening partnerships, and positioning XRP as the bridge asset for a tokenized future. And as the financial system evolves into blockchain-based settlement, that bridge is going to be worth a lot more than most people realize. Let's talk about what's changing right now. In 2025, the world is undergoing a quiet but massive transformation in money movement. Central banks are testing CBDCs, digital versions of their currencies. Major institutions are tokenizing assets, turning everything from real estate to government bonds into digital representations that can move instantly. And the missing piece in this new puzzle is liquidity. How do all these systems connect? That's where XRP shines. Ripple's network, built on the XRP ledger, can move any currency, any asset across borders in seconds with near zero cost. It's not theory. It's already being tested in over 40 countries. And as more systems go live between now and 2026, the demand for liquidity will explode. Because every CBDC, every tokenized bond, every cross-border payment still needs a neutral asset to bridge value between systems. That asset doesn't have to be XRP, but XRP was literally built for it. Now let's talk numbers, because hype means nothing without math. Today, XRP trades between 3 and 350 after stabilizing from its post-lawsuit breakout earlier this year. That price might not sound exciting, but here's the key. XRP is massively undervalued relative to its use case. To understand why, let's look at Ripple's strategy. Ripple has signed deals with over 300 financial institutions worldwide, including major players in Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. These aren't just pilots. They're infrastructure partnerships with banks and fintech companies using XRP for on-demand liquidity to settle real transactions. The more volume moves through those corridors, the more XRP is needed as liquidity. And as liquidity locks into private settlement channels, less XRP remains in public circulation. That's how supply shock happens. Quietly, then suddenly. It's not about hype, it's about function. Let's say XRP captures even 3% of the global cross-border payments market by 2030, a conservative estimate given Ripple's partnerships. That market is worth over $150 trillion annually. Even if XRP settles just a small fraction of that, the value per coin would need to rise substantially to support global liquidity demand. Analysts have modeled this using transaction velocity and liquidity depth metrics. At 3% market penetration, XRP could easily justify prices in the 10-15 range by 2030. At 5 to 10%, $25 to $50 becomes realistic. Now, that doesn't mean it happens overnight, but the accumulation phase, The time when smart investors quietly build positions happens before the revaluation. That's now. That's why 2025 into 2026 is critical. It's the phase between disbelief and recognition. Once the mainstream wakes up, the window closes. We've seen this movie before. In 2015, Bitcoin traded under $300. In 2019, Ethereum sat below $200. Both had their moments of silence, when no one cared, when everyone was distracted, before their exponential phase began. XRP is in that same silence now. Most people gave up during the lawsuit. They moved on to newer narratives. But while attention shifted, Ripple kept building. And now, as regulation, tokenization, and digital payments converge, XRP is perfectly positioned. That's what the early millionaires always understand. Wealth doesn't come from chasing hype. It comes from recognizing quiet value before the crowd does. Let's talk about accumulation. To become a millionaire with XRP, the math is simple, but execution is not. At $10 per coin, you'd need 100,000 XRP. At $25, you'd need 40,000. At $50, just 20,000. That's not small money, but it's not impossible either, especially for investors who think long term. And here's the most important part. You don't need to hit those numbers exactly. You just need to be positioned before the momentum begins. Because once institutional money floods in, once ETFs and tokenization networks start demanding real liquidity, the price will move faster than most people can react. And by then, it'll be too late to accumulate meaningfully. Now let's talk about what 2026 actually represents, and why that year specifically could mark the turning point. In 2026, global liquidity conditions are expected to shift again. Analysts at major institutions like BlackRock, Fidelity, and JP Morgan predict that by late 2026, tokenized finance will cross the $1 trillion threshold. That's the inflection point, the moment blockchain-based assets stop being experiments and become standard practice. By that time, central bank digital currencies will be live in multiple countries, and many of them will need interoperability. That's where Ripple's technology becomes indispensable. Ripple is already working with the Monetary Authority of Singapore, the Central Bank of Bhutan, and the National Bank of Georgia on CBDC solutions. There are also strong ties forming in the Middle East, a region rapidly adopting blockchain for cross-border settlements. These systems all connect through the same backbone, the XRP ledger. So, as adoption spreads, every transaction indirectly reinforces XRP's utility and value. That's what most retail investors don't see. The price might look stagnant, but the foundation underneath it is expanding exponentially. Let's shift gears and talk psychology, because markets are emotional. Most people don't miss opportunities because of bad timing. They miss them because of hesitation. When prices fall, they panic. When prices rise, they doubt. And by the time they feel confident, it's already over. Right now, the noise in the market is high. Bitcoin dominance, ETF narratives, macro uncertainty, it's all designed to distract. But the smart money, the institutions, the funds, the early builders are accumulating assets with a real-world purpose. They know that blockchain isn't going away. It's being absorbed by the system itself. And in that transformation, XRP sits at the crossroads between the old and the new, between banks and DeFi, between regulation and innovation. That's where millionaires are made. Let's look at what the next phase could look like. The first signal will be liquidity expansion, more exchanges relisting XRP, more corridors going live, and more institutional-grade products being built around it. The second will be headlines. Major banks publicly integrating RippleNet, central banks launching CBDCs connected to Ripple's infrastructure. And the third will be price discovery, when the public market finally realizes how much XRP liquidity has already been locked privately. By the time that happens, the narrative will shift fast. The same voices calling XRP dead will call it revolutionary. We've seen this pattern with every major innovation: disbelief, ridicule, recognition, then regret. 2026 is when recognition begins. That's why this window matters so much. Now let's be realistic. Not everyone who holds XRP will become a millionaire. Timing, patience, and risk management matter. But the opportunity exists, and it's one of the clearest asymmetric setups in the market today. You have an asset that's globally integrated, legally cleared, and underpriced relative to its utility. You have institutions preparing to scale adoption within the next 18 months. And you have a macro environment that's shifting from speculation to utility. That's the perfect setup. It doesn't guarantee success, but it positions you on the right side of the equation. That's all you can ask for in markets, to be early, informed, and prepared. Let's visualize the long term. By 2030, the financial landscape will look nothing like today. Money will move digitally across programmable systems. CBDCs will settle in seconds. Assets will be tokenized, fractionalized, and traded globally in real time. And somewhere in that architecture, bridging it all, will be neutral assets, tokens that hold liquidity across borders. XRP was designed for that exact role. When you understand that, price becomes a lagging indicator. Value comes first, recognition comes later. That's why this window, 2025 into 2026, is so important. Because once the architecture is fully in place, XRP won't be an underdog anymore. It'll be the backbone, and the investors who positioned early will already be on the winning side of history. So ask yourself this: when the next bull market fully ignites, do you want to be chasing green candles or sitting quietly, watching your portfolio multiply because you understood the equation before everyone else? The difference between those two realities isn't luck, it's preparation. And preparation happens now, not later, because the window is closing fast. If this gave you clarity and conviction, subscribe to Crypto Equation, where we uncover the truth behind crypto, finance, and innovation. Comment below, how many XRP are you holding, and what's your target for 2026? Remember, the future doesn't reward noise, it rewards vision. And in this market, vision is everything. This is Crypto Equation, and I'll see you in the next one.